Dan Weiser, the Artistic Director of CLASSICOPIA. We want to welcome you to part 2 of our 3-part extravaganza, Beethoven's Violin, as we perform 8 out of his 10 incredible violin sonatas in celebration of his 250th birthday, which occurred back in December. With me again, Tim Schwarz on violin, fantastic colleague. We're here in my living room in Baltimore, filled with the wonderful, vibrant paintings of my late father. And today we're going to explore the middle period of Beethoven, his sonatas 6, 7, and 8, all written in the same year, 1802, which was a truly momentous year for Beethoven. He spent several months that year in a little village called Heiligenstadt, trying to come to grips with his deafness, which was beginning to take over his life. And he was in despair, and in fact wrote a letter in that year where he almost considered killing himself. And thankfully it was the power of his music which brought him back and brought him into a kind of a whole new period we call the middle period, the heroic period, and these sonatas really start us towards that place. So we hope you enjoy sonatas 6, 7, and 8 by Ludwig van Beethoven. We're going to begin with Sonata number 6, Opus 30, number 1 in A major, a really beautiful piece. This again, written in 1802. When last we saw Beethoven, he had written his Spring Sonata in 1800 or 1801. And there's a really fascinating letter that he writes to his good friend Franz Wegler, who had become a doctor back in Bonn in June of 1800, where he shows that things are going pretty well for him in Vienna. He writes to him, "You desire to know something of my position here. Well, it is by no means bad. My compositions are very profitable, and I may say that I have almost more commissions than it is possible for me to execute. I can have 6 or 7 publishers or more for each piece. If I choose, they no longer bargain with me. I demand, and they pay." So you see, this is a very good thing. That malicious demon, however, bad health, has been a stumbling block in my path. My hearing during the last 3 years has become gradually worse. My ears are buzzing and ringing perpetually, day and night. I can with truth say that my life is very wretched. For nearly 2 years past, I have avoided all society because I find it impossible to say to people, "I am deaf." In any other profession, this might be more tolerable, but in mine, such a condition is truly frightful. Besides, what would my enemies say to this? And they are not few in number. So he goes to several different doctors. He tries out many different treatment plans, including hot, cold baths, oil of almonds, soaking in the Danube, even electric shock and some leeches, but nothing seems to work. And one of his doctors advises him that maybe he needs some time off in the countryside. So in the summer of 1802, he heads off to Heiligenstadt, which was then a very quiet little village. Now it's kind of the northern terminus of the city's subway system. But he really lived kind of the life of a hermit for that summer of 1802. And only got visits from his kind of assistant, Ferdinand Ries, a young composer who would write down a lot of Beethoven's music. And in fact, they would take long walks in the countryside. And it was Ries who wrote later, "During these walks once, I called his attention to a shepherd who was piping very agreeably in the woods on a flute made of a twig of elder. For half an hour, Beethoven could hear nothing. And though I assured him that it was the same with me, which was not the case, he became extremely quiet and morose. When he occasionally seemed to be merry, it was generally to the extreme of boisterousness. But this happens seldom." So it's clear that Beethoven was realizing there was a world out there that he was not hearing completely. But amazingly, this first sonata that he writes, this Opus 30, number 1 in A major, is just a very beautiful, tender piece. And what's fascinating about it is it starts very innocently, this little rumble on the piano, but out of that little kernel the whole piece gets developed, and we'll see this, of course, in his Fifth Symphony, bum, 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 where that little motive generates the whole piece. It's not a full theme that he's coming up with like Mozart. It's just a little smidgen of something, but he sort of sees those little atoms and makes them come alive in so many ways, and that's really Beethoven's process completely. So you hear this very tender first movement, a wonderful dialogue between the two instruments, and then a second movement that is almost spiritual in nature. In fact, Geli Deranyi, a very famous Hungarian violinist, wrote about this. She said, "This adagio is a great favorite of mine. The blend of the two instruments is so perfect a thing. The whole movement has such a feeling of tenderness and sorrow that it reminds me of Michelangelo's Pietà and his unfinished marvel, The Descent of the Cross. I do not want to suggest that this adagio could be called religious music. I am only thinking in both cases of the expression of infinite tenderness and sorrow, whether put into sound or carved in stone." A beautiful quote. And then there's a wonderful little finale. Now, originally, the last movement of this piece was the movement that is now the last movement of the Kreutzer Sonata, which we will come to next week. But here it just seemed like it was going to be too tumultuous a movement to finish off this very beautiful piece. So he discarded it, picked it up later, and it actually works very well for the Kreutzer. But this one is a much more modest little rondo that sort of sets up the piece with a very nice little conclusion. So we hope you enjoy Sonata number 6, Opus 30, number 1 in A major. We're now going to perform Sonata number 7 in C minor, one of his most passionate and dramatic works. C minor was a key that Beethoven returned to when he sort of wanted to say something really dramatic and profound. His Fifth Symphony, for example, or the Pathetique Sonata for piano. Just before he had gone to Heiligenstadt, he had written another letter to Franz Wegler, and in it he said, "You should now see me as happy as I am ever destined to be here below. Not unhappy. No, that I could not endure. I will boldly meet my fate. Never shall it succeed in crushing me. It is so glorious to live one's life 1,000 times over. I feel that I am no longer made for a quiet existence." I'm not sure he was ever made for a quiet existence. But once he got to Heiligenstadt, as we said before, he really began to despair, especially because he began to realize there was a world of sound around him that he was not really a part of. And he writes a letter to his brothers, which we now call the Heiligenstadt Testament. He never sent this letter. It was found in his papers, and he seemed to want people to find this letter, to let us know what he was going through in order to get to that next stage in his life. And I'll just read a little bit. This is from October 6th, 1802. "For my brothers, for the last 6 years I have been afflicted with an incredible complaint, which has been made worse by incompetent doctors. From year to year, my hopes of being cured have gradually been shattered, and finally, I have been forced to accept the prospect of a permanent infirmity, the curing of which may perhaps take years or may even prove to be impossible. Though endowed with a passionate and lively temperament, and even fond of the distractions offered by society, I was soon obliged to seclude myself and live in solitude. If at times I decided to ignore my infirmity, alas, how cruelly was I then driven back by the intensified sad experience of my poor hearing. Yet I could not bring myself to say to people, 'Speak up, shout, for I am deaf.' How could I possibly refer to the impairing of a sense which in me should be more perfectly developed than in other people, a sense which at one time I possessed in the greatest perfection, even to a degree of perfection such as assuredly few in my profession have ever or will ever possess. I cannot do it, so forgive me if you see me withdrawing from your company, which I used to enjoy. Moreover, my misfortune pains me doubly, inasmuch as it leads me to my being misjudged. For me, there can be no relaxation in human society, no refined conversations, no mutual confidences. I must live alone, and I might creep into society only as often as sheer necessity demands. I must live like an outcast. If I appear in company, I am overcome by a burning anxiety, a fear that I am running the risk of letting people notice my condition. But how humiliated I have felt if somebody standing beside me heard the sound of a flute in the distance and I heard nothing, or if somebody heard a shepherd sing and again I heard nothing. Such experiences almost made me despair, and I was on the point of putting an end to my life. The only thing that held me back was my art. For indeed, it seemed to me impossible to leave this world before I had produced all the works that I felt the urge to compose, and thus I have dragged on this miserable existence, a truly miserable existence. So it is in that spirit that he writes his seventh sonata. And we can sort of feel some of the pain in this work. And it starts off with this wonderful piano solo, a very taut little motive. And within that, the whole piece sort of begins to take off. And we get these sort of themes, these military themes. And we have to remember that Napoleon and his troops were everywhere at this time. They were invading Vienna at different periods. And there were military people around all the time. And we get this little bum, ba-bum, bum, ba-bum, bum, ba-bum, a very military theme that has a joyous quality to it. Again, Beethoven admired Napoleon greatly until Napoleon sort of crowned himself emperor, but he saw himself as a bit of a Napoleon, sort of crushing the old world of music and developing this whole new style that would become the Romantic period. And we really feel that this piece is putting us on this threshold of a whole new musical language that he would then develop the next year in his Eroica Symphony and then later in the Fifth Symphony, which this has a lot of connections to. Also interesting, there are 4 movements in this sonata. He had not done that previously, and usually a symphony is what had 4 movements. Sonatas often just had 3, a fast movement, a slow movement, and a fast movement. But again, he's trying to broaden out the idea of what a sonata could be, that it's really almost symphonic in character. This also has a gorgeous, slow second movement, almost spiritual nature like it was in the 6th sonata. There's this very fun little scherzo, a joke almost, that is a very short little third movement. Similar, we heard this in the Spring Sonata, but here it really sort of has a much broader feel to it. And then again, an exciting last movement that drives right to the end, getting the blood flowing. And we hope you enjoy Sonata number 7 in C minor, opus 30, number 2. right, we're going to finish up with Sonata number 8, Opus 30, number 3. All of these pieces, again, written during this same period, but really they feel so different after that. The power, the drama of Sonata number 7. Beethoven returns here in the 8th Sonata to something much lighter, more compact, almost the most cheerful sonata that Beethoven wrote. And I thought I'd demonstrate a few things on the piano to set this one up. Again, we've talked a lot about how Beethoven takes these very simple scales or motives, nothing powerful about that, and turns them into giant pieces. In this, he does something very similar. He starts off with this very simple little rolling down scale and back up with a little arpeggio. All right, this is what we practice all the days when we're learning how to get the technique of a piano, but he puts that all together and comes up out of that with this wonderfully fun, frolicky first movement. Then I want to jump ahead to the second movement, which starts off with this very beautiful simple little minuet, light dance, and in the middle he has the violin take a nice theme. And underneath he has a little pak on a polka bass, but you would expect it to have the emphasis on the first beat. This is kind of like a waltz, a minuet. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. But Beethoven, in his craziness, sort of distracts with the beat, and he puts these sforzandos, or accents, in all the wrong places. So this is what the piano part sounds like. 1, 2. It's almost ugly, and it really does feel like a beer song as everyone is singing along. But putting accents on the second beat of a measure just is only something Beethoven would do, kind of messing up with our whole sense of what time would be. And then we get to this wonderful third movement, and this we sort of get the connection back to Haydn. Haydn was famous for his wonderful gypsy rondos, these fast and elegant sort of pieces. And Beethoven, of course, studied with Haydn briefly when he first got to Vienna. They did not quite get along, but Haydn recognized the genius. And so we get this wonderful... All of that, we keep coming back to that little motive, little mice scurrying around, and it's just a wonderful, joyous way to conclude our second concert here, Sonatas number 8, Opus 30, number 3. Thank you for joining us for part 2 of Beethoven's Violin. I hope you can join us again next week when we present the final 2 sonatas, Sonata number 9, the incredible Kreutzer Sonata, an epic work, and then the 10th Sonata, a very quirky little piece that we wrote later in life in his sort of third phase of composing. Again, a huge thanks to Tim Schwarz, and also to Francis Borowski, who helped me video and edit these concerts. And I hope you can offer a donation, a payment to CLASSICOPIA.org. The website is below to help us continue to make these live streams possible during the pandemic. I am Dan Weiser, the Artistic Director of CLASSICOPIA. For Marcia Colligan, our President, I want to thank you for all of your support through the years, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.